Good evening. It's great to see such a fantastic crowd here tonight. And I'm glad we advertised that the volleyball match was taking place in the Forum, so it was really good for you. No, hi, I'm Roger Casey, and as president of McDaniel, it's my privilege to welcome you to our first Smart Talk of the academic year, a particularly momentous year in which we'll be celebrating our 150th anniversary. Through this program, we can highlight the McDaniel brand of liberal arts education at work through the achievements of our amazing alumni. Many of these same alumni come back to campus to connect with students through our Center for Experience and Opportunity, offering career expertise and internships and jobs. And if you didn't get a chance to meet the CEO Director, Connie Scarlatta, on your way in, she's stationed right at the back by the main door. Wave your hand there, Connie. Please stop by afterwards and learn more about the many ways that you can get involved and connected through the CEO. Tonight's Smart Talk takes on a special meaning as we honor how far we've come as an institution and we look ahead to what we will become over the next 1.5 centuries. And so given the turnout tonight, I'm hoping we're looking at a lot of physicians out here because as I get older, I will need your help. So thank you. There has never been a more pressing need for liberally educated men and women in our society, and we know that our personalized curriculum here at McDaniel provides students with the kind of preparation and mentoring they need to gain entrance into the nation's best medical schools. Over many decades, our graduates have made significant contributions to the greater good in a wide range of medical specialties. 3 of them are with us tonight, and I'm honored to introduce tonight's panel of speakers. Dr. Doug Barnes earned his bachelor's degree in biology in 1979 and went on to receive a doctor in dental surgery from the University of Maryland Dental School in 1983. He also earned a certificate from the University of Maryland Dental School in Advanced General Dentistry in '84 and a master's in oral biology in '92 from Maryland Graduate School. Dr. Barnes is a professor and the executive director and chief dental officer for the Family Practice Clinics of Excellence at the University of Maryland School of Dentistry. He's an active clinical dental materials researcher with millions of dollars of funding from dental material manufacturers, as well as from training and community service grants. Dr. Barnes has published numerous articles and presented lectures on aesthetic dentistry in the United States and internationally. He maintains an active faculty practice at the School of Dentistry in Baltimore. Dr. Ann Hackman majored in psychobiology and is a proud member of the class of 1980. And let me add that since graduation, Ann has faithfully served as a class reporter collecting alumni updates for the alumni magazine, The Hill. So thank you, Ann, for your service there. Dr. Hackman earned her MD at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and completed her residency at University of Maryland Medical System. She's a community psychiatry division director and associate professor at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, where she specializes in chronic mental illness and schizophrenia. Dr. Hackman is certified in addiction, forensic, and general psychiatry by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. Ann has co-published and presented on various psychiatric topics and issues, and she's also the medical director of the program of Assertive Community Treatment, senior education consultant, associate residency training director, senior psychiatrist for RAISE, and associate medical director of the Walter P. Carter Center. Dr. Sandra Ruby graduated with a biology chemistry degree in 1999 and earned her MD at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. She completed a fellowship in clinical neurophysiology and residency at the University of Maryland Medical Center and an internship in internal medicine at Mercy Medical Center. Dr. Ruby is a neurologist with Carroll Health Group, where she provides comprehensive diagnosis and treatment of neurological conditions. She's board certified in neurology by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology and has a special interest in neuromuscular disorders. Dr. Ruby provides both inpatient and outpatient consultations and acute stroke care, and also performs EMGs and interprets EEGs. She's affiliated with Sinai Hospital of Baltimore and is stroke director for Carroll Hospital Center. We were proud to cheer her accomplishments over homecoming weekend when she received McDaniel's Alumni Professional Achievement Award. Congratulations. So the way this works is each one of our speakers will take a few minutes to come up to the podium here and share their personal story. And then I'll sit down and lead a conversation with our distinguished panel, including the questions that we've gathered from the audience here tonight. So please join me in welcoming back to the Hill Doug, Ann, and Sandra. Doug?
Dr. Casey, you gave me this nice pen, so I have a pen for you from our school, from the dental school, and it lights up as you write, so it'll give you, at our age, we need that, so you can think about the dental school. So,
Thank
all right,
you.
there you go. Thanks. This is a great opportunity, and I think I'm on here. So thank you for inviting me here, and this is really an honor. There's a couple people I'd like to highlight here. Is one of my first professors at the dental school, Dr. Hyatt. If you could stand up and let me give you a round of applause. He was good enough to be a science faculty member at Western Maryland College. How's that? But he was a wonderful mentor to me, so thanks for coming. I also have a colleague, Leila Lieberman, who works at the dental school with me and is working on her PhD and should get it shortly. So, and it was also nice seeing Dr. Seidel, who I never took any of his classes because I had to go to the labs and all the long afternoons, but it's nice seeing you, Dr. Seidel. So anyway, when I was invited to this, I sent the invitation to my brothers who also went here. They graduated. I had 3 brothers who went here, and they graduated 72, 77, and 78, I think. I got that right. And all 3 of them sent me separate emails saying the same thing, and they didn't talk together. They said, "Why would you be selected to give a SmartTALK?" And so you can see there's lots of love in our family, and I responded to them because I was the smartest in the family. So, but anyway, I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm going to be saying Western Maryland College and McDaniel because it's ingrained in my head, but I mean the same thing when I say that. So, but anyway, I came to the school because I would come up as a kid and visit my brothers and go to the football games, which was really neat. And I know it's still a great experience. The cars park around it, and you get to see the games, and it's a very social event. And so I saw that, and I saw the camaraderie. I played golf at the golf course, which was not many schools at this size have a golf course. And they, I didn't know anything about the academics. I mean, we didn't think about that when we were kids, but I just really liked the environment. I came up here and decided to go here. So I was the 4th of the boys that went here. My sister actually went to College Park, but it was a great experience, and what a great opportunity. And some of my best friends for life went here too, and actually were in courses with Dr. Seidel. So I'm going to hit some talking points I'd like to highlight, but I'd like to just talk about the location of the school, what it meant to me, the campus, the liberal arts education as a student and also as a person who went into academia. The science program here that I enjoyed. I enjoyed it, but it taught me well and prepared me for what I had to do later on in my years. And the faculty were excellent, and you create long-term relationships with these faculty, and so it's the same thing with Dr. Hyatt and some of my other dental faculty. And also Dr. Leitner was also a faculty member here. Is he here tonight? I didn't know. I didn't see him. So anyway. We're going to talk a little bit about faculty and then the sports and fraternity life, but I won't say much about the fraternity life because what goes on in fraternities stays in fraternities, right, guys? So I got that right? So anyway, we'll go back to the location. I grew up in Washington, D.C., or Silver Spring, actually, and it was an hour away from home, far enough to be away from home, but close enough to go home on weekends if I wanted to do that. I really liked that. The campus, as you all know, is beautiful. The golf course was beautiful until you had to run it for soccer, which I played soccer. And So it was pretty for the most part until I had to run it. But what a wonderful campus, and what you've done to it. The dining hall is marvelous now, and we weren't treated like that when we were students, but we did have a dining hall and we have food, but not this fancy, I can tell you that. It's very nice. The liberal arts education was something that I didn't really appreciate as a student. We had essays we had to write, we had essay exams we had to do, and everything was written, and I was thinking I wanted to be a dentist so I didn't have to write. My brothers went to law school, my dad was a judge, and my dad was writing every night, and I said I don't want to write. But we did it as a liberal arts student. And that became very important to me because when I went into dentistry, I thought I was going to be a practitioner, but I started loving the academic life at the dental school, and I went back for additional training, and then I was recruited to be on faculty there, and I stayed there, and I ended up writing, doing grants, writing papers, writing. So, and I know a lot of my colleagues that went to the bigger schools didn't have that. They had multiple choice questions on their tests and didn't write as much. So the writing part, which I thought I would never do, became so critical in my career as I moved on. So that was something I really didn't appreciate as a student, but I really appreciate it now. What else can I tell you? The science department trained me well. They prepared me for my advanced degree. I was very happy with that. The faculty that I had was, I don't know if you remember, Dr. Kirshner, Dr. Royer, Dr. Allsbach, Dr. Brown. They were all excellent. We were taught by them. We weren't taught by TAs. They actually would sit down with us and they would mentor us. And so you got that personalized touch that sometimes you don't see at bigger schools. I have 6 kids, and 5 of them so far have gone to bigger schools, University of Maryland, and because they get discounts. That's important when you have 6 kids. But I see their experiences. It's a great education at a big school, but it's totally different. It's totally different. And a lot of their teaching goes on by TAs, but it's a different environment. But the environment here was perfect for me, and I really appreciate that. Brought up Dr. Leitner. I didn't have any of his classes, but he was a real advocate for the soccer team, and he would invite us over for dinner, and he would serve us a nice dinner, very fancy. You know, we would all be fooling around and, knocking drinks over and all that stuff. But he would take the time to have us over there, and we would have a nice dinner, and we would actually, we would have salad after the main course. I never understood that, but he said they do that in Paris. So they do it in France, and I didn't know that because I hadn't been far from Silver Spring. But anyway, what a great thing. And my sports life here was fantastic. I played soccer for 4 years. I got to be the captain for 3 years, and I was just inducted into the Hall of Fame, which I really appreciate. That was a real big deal. And then my boys came to it and watched it. I've coached them my whole life in soccer, and the first thing they said to me, well, it was a lot easier when you were in school. So I said, really? So, but it was a great opportunity with sports, and then I was involved in fraternity life and had a very nice social life here. So I can't say enough for what I got from the school. And so I'm going to leave the floor to our next presenter, and we'll be around for questions after that. Is that correct? Okay.
Hello, I'm Ann Hackman, and I'm actually delighted to be here. Thank you, Dr. Casey. It is very cool to be back on the Hill. I occasionally get invited back by Kathy Hill, who teaches some courses in the psychology department, and she'll sometimes let me come do a lecture. So it's fun to be back here now for this. I thought I would start out by telling you what I do now in terms that you might possibly understand, because all that mess from my CV is incomprehensible. I'm a psychiatrist in Baltimore at the University of Maryland. I'm the Division Director for Community Psychiatry, and the thing that I've done for almost 25 years in the practice of psychiatry is work for what's called an assertive community treatment team. So that means that rather than being office-based and meeting with people in my office, I spend much of my day running around the city of Baltimore, meeting people in their homes, occasionally in shelters, every once in a while under bridges, and providing treatment for people with serious and persistent mental illness, so disorders like schizophrenia, who have not otherwise been able to get treatment. And I know that most people are like, seriously? And I think it's actually a really, really cool thing to do. I also do some traditional office-based mental health, and for the last 7 or 8 years, I've worked with a program called RAISE, which stands for Recovery After Initial Schizophrenia Episode. And we work with young people within the first 2 years of a psychotic episode with an intervention that is team-based and really designed to help people be able to get back on their feet quickly and not end up having some of the problems in life that some of the people have that I work with on the assertive community treatment team. I also do a ton of teaching at the University of Maryland. I'm very involved with the residency program and with medical student teaching. So that's what I do now. Let me go back to, I guess, first of all, how I ended up at Western Maryland. And for me, there was generational history. My grandfather actually came here for a couple of years and left to go be in the Navy during World War I. And both of my parents graduated from here. My dad, Jim Hackman, in 1950, and my mom, Mary Hawkins Hackman, in 1952. So from the time I was a little bitty girl, they would occasionally bring me up here to visit the Hill, talk with Esther Smith, who had been the theater department head for a number of years and with whom they had both done theater. And I really kind of always thought I'd go here. And this was in a day long before you had to apply to at least 73 places and travel the country and all up and down the coast to figure out where you were going. And this was actually the only place I applied. I came here thinking I wanted to go to med school. We'll get back to that in a minute. But having just great pleasure in literature, in history, in the arts. And I actually started out as a biology major, pre-med. The first couple of years went pretty well, and then I hit organic chemistry. That did not go so well. It did not go so well at all. And at that point, along with Kathy Hill, we decided we were going to go be psychobiology majors because that did not require organic chemistry. And it seemed like a no-brainer because psychology was a blast. There was all kinds of cool stuff. We had great labs. I learned things in personality theory class here at Western Maryland that I actually never learned either with a master's in psychology or in my psychiatry training. That was fun. And the other thing that was fun was that I actually graduated with more credits in literature than I did in my major. I took all of the theater classes except for the performance ones, so I took all of the reading plays and that kind of thing. I was co-editor for Contrast, the college campus literary magazine. I also, sorry for those of you I am offending, I was about as far from Greek life as you could get. In theory, there was a sorority on campus which will remain nameless, which would have been forced to take me as a legacy because my mother had been part of that sorority. They were deeply pleased when I never rushed. Instead, I did things like be part of a very short-lived and, I don't know, that didn't turn out so well either, feminist alliance. We did not make ourselves popular in the late 1970s on the then Western Maryland campus. None of the Greek organizations wished to have anything to do with those of us who were being hardcore 1970s feminists. But Western Maryland gave me the opportunity to do that. I was also incredibly involved with student government. I was student government secretary or class secretary for a number of years and remain class secretary to this very day, which is a really cool thing. You know, you get all the letters from your classmates and you get to put them together, and I've seen it go from when you sent out 1 million postcards and you had to lick the stamps to put on the postcards to send them out, to now I just get back emails and I can paste them all together, and it's a very cool way to stay in touch here. I met my husband here. That was a very good thing. about being here at Western Maryland. He's an attorney, and we were married here on the Hill in 1982, and celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary this year. Well, thank you. I think he and I would both tell you that we're really way too old to change anything at this point. There were a million things to love. I'm sure a lot of those same things are still here. I lived over in a house on the edge of campus for 1 year. I lived in the apartments 1 year. I like to bake. My roommates loved it when I had a terrible day because I would come home and bake until I felt better. Sometimes that took a really long time. I would make bread because you can beat the stuffing out of bread when you're making it. And then you could share this stuff with the other people around campus, and it was just cool. Sledding, do you guys still sled on the golf course and stolen cafeteria trays, or do we no longer use cafeteria trays, or what's the deal here? No. Anyway, stolen cafeteria trays, sledding on the golf course, coolest stuff ever. And you could walk into town, and there's cool stuff in town. Going over to Boggers was something always to be done, especially if my parents were here and on campus. I also grew up in the Baltimore area, and what's now McDaniel was close enough and far enough away. So you could go home for the weekend, but nobody was going to pop in to surprise you. And that was good. As to how I ended up then eventually in med school and how my liberal arts education has sort of impacted my career from here, I went off and did master's in psychology stuff when I graduated from here. And after a couple of years of that, I thought, I'm in a different place. Let's go back and try the organic chemistry thing again. And I did what would now be a post-bac and applied to the University of Maryland and got accepted there. Went there thinking probably psychiatry, but really enjoyed a lot of other things too, and there would have been, multiple other possibilities that I would have thoroughly enjoyed. In the work that I do, one of the things that I'm constantly aware of in working with the people that I treat is their narrative, the story that they have to tell, and the stories that the patients that I work with have to tell are every bit as marvelous as the stories that I read in major British writers and some of the other courses that I took here. And really, the education here gives me a framework for much of what else I do in life. And I would add that one can continue a liberal arts education. I currently live right off the campus at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm 8 credits into my 10-credit Master's in Liberal Arts program because I can. So I will take questions at the end too if you have them for me. Thank you so much, and I'll give you our next speaker.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Casey, for inviting me today. And I feel like I was just here. I'm speaking directly to the students like a year ago or 2 years ago, but then I looked at when I graduated, and it's been a lot longer than that. So I feel like I was just here. So it's wonderful to be back here. And actually, I was sitting here about 20 years ago in Decker Forum, and there was we had a dinner, and there were physicians that came to the dinner, and we sat. It was one physician per table with us students, and we got to sit and talk and have dinner and ask a lot of questions. And I remember at that phase in my life wanting to know step by step, how did you do it? How did you become where you wanted to be? Because at that point, I really thought I wanted to do medicine, and I wanted to hear what they did to get to that point. So I don't know if that's what you want from me, but that's what I'm going to give you today. So I think there were 4 really big deciding points for me as I went into my field of medicine. And step 1 was definitely deciding on a college. So I actually started off not here at Western Maryland or McDaniel College. I was a resident of Westminster. I went to Westminster High School. And so my grandparents had a furniture store on Main Street. And so, of course, at graduation from high school, my first thought was to leave Westminster. And so I did. I followed my sister to her alma mater, where I thought I was going to probably major in engineering. And I got to engineering fall semester, and I looked around the room at other engineers, and I realized I didn't feel like I really fit in engineering. So I started backtracking and saying, do I really want to do engineering, or what is it that I'm interested in? And that fall semester, I decided I wanted to switch to a pre-medical career. And so at that point, and also my experience in that fall semester was taught in more of that, larger, with a TA teaching the class, larger lecture hall, not very, close relationships with your instructor. And I realized at that point in my learning career, that wasn't the best way for me to learn. So at that point, between my fall and spring, I transferred here to McDaniel College. And I jumped in with 2 feet when I got here, majoring in biology and chemistry. I joined the basketball team when I got here at the beginning in that winter time, and really, really loved my time here. I played basketball, I played soccer, I had some volunteer positions, I worked with the Rape Crisis Organization here in Westminster. I was able to do the Jan term, the medical Jan term. I don't know if y'all still have that or not, where we got to go to University of Maryland for that Jan term, and we got hooked up in different areas, and I ended up being in the nursery where I helped take care of some of the babies that were going through withdrawal, and it was really a cool time for me to be involved and be there with the med students and residents. And you just sit back like a fly on the wall watching and saying, is this some place that I actually see myself? And at that time, I really did think that was a good fit for me. I also got to have a research opportunity here. So for 2 of my summers, I was able to research with the Dr. Smiths, and that was really great. Both I was working on molecular modeling for HIV research and really learned a lot about what research meant. And I got to work one-on-one with people that are leaders in that field. And that was really phenomenal. And now looking back that I had that experience here. I would say that highlight of my education here was really the individualized attention that I got here. And it wasn't just me. I think everybody found their niche, and the mentorship. So that was what I took away from my time here. And I think the biggest key was time management that I learned here, that I think a liberal arts education and being at a community school like this, where you're involved in a lot of things. I was involved in basketball and soccer, and when you're involved in a lot of different things, you learn that you can't wait till 11 p.m. to maybe start your paper. You got to work it in between the 2-hour window that you actually have that day. So I think the time management I learned here in medicine now may be the key to why I'm able to do what I am able to do today. So when I decided to go into the medical field, it also wasn't as clear-cut for me. So pre-med, gung-ho, medical school is where I'm going. And between junior and senior year, my husband and I, we had our first child here. And so I remember we would have classes together. Well, not together. We could never have the same class because we had to pass off the baby. But I would come with Blake strapped on my chest in the carrier, and then he would be finished his class, he'd come out, I'd pass the carrier over, he'd strap it on, and I'd run off to my class. So that was what my senior year was like. And at that point, at the end of senior year, I thought, I still want to be in the healthcare field, but I probably don't want to do medical school at this point. I'm looking at pharmacy, I was looking at nursing, and that year, while I was trying to decide what I wanted to do after graduation, I had a professor that told me, no, you really should do medical school. So I did. And I applied to University of Maryland and went. And that was quite a ride, because starting off medical school is when we had our second child, Anna, at the very start of medical school. So I had a 3-year-old and a newborn starting medical school. And looking back, I have no idea what I was thinking, but I survived. We all survived. I had amazing support from my husband and my parents. So that's really the only way. When people ask how that happened, that's really literally the only way. So those time management skills that I learned here, as you can imagine, in medical school were key. So I lived here in Westminster, and I commuted to University of Maryland, where I went for medical school. And every day on the Metro, I would study on the Metro, go to my classes, ride back, study on the Metro, and then study late at night. And that was a really busy time, but I really feel like the academic support that I had here at McDaniel really helped me, so that when I went there, I remember whatever class it was, you learned it here. But then when you go to medical school, you learn what you learned in a whole semester, maybe in like 2 weeks. So you're going into so much depth. And that was where I felt like the great basis I had by the teaching here was able to support me for going into that degree of depth. In medical school is when everyone decides on their specialty, and third year is when you do your clerkships, when you get to decide what you really like. And the big division is surgical versus non-surgical first. And I loved the surgery. I loved the technical aspect of surgery, but couldn't really picture myself doing trauma surgery with, 2 young children at home. So I was thinking more at that point. I also enjoyed more of the cognitive specialties at that point. So going through my third-year clerkships is when I did neurology, and I fell in love with neurology from the neuroanatomy, some lesion somewhere in the brain or spinal cord, and how it presents clinically. So you have a patient coming before you, and you have to figure out by looking at them where in that whole neuroaxis up to the brain exactly where the lesion possibly could be, and then the pathology and treatment and management. So that's where I fell in love at that point with neurology, and completed my neurology residency at University of Maryland. I think from here, what I got also was my communication skills that helped me. So in residency and med school, sometimes I found some of my colleagues going into a patient room and asking questions and having a conversation was a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. And I feel like from how I learned here, my sociology classes, I feel like I felt more comfortable in that scenario. So I felt like that was very key. At the end of residency fellowship is when everyone decides about academic versus community. And I love the idea of academic with the teaching. You have a lot less call, and you have residents to help buffer your call there. But I also saw a big need back here in the community where I came from of practicing neurology and the need for someone to help fill that. So I did decide to come back here to the community where I practice. And here I've been able to take care of friends of my grandparents and my parents and community members, and have found that very rewarding. And then also I've been able to start a primary stroke center here, where in the past, if someone had stroke symptoms, say in this area, they had to be transported down to Baltimore, where that was the closest stroke center. Now, though, we've got a designation here at Carroll Hospital that if someone has stroke symptoms, which is lack of blood flow to part of the brain, that they're treated immediately here locally at Carroll Hospital. You lose 1.9 million neurons per minute. So you can see a drive down the road on 695 is not what you want to do when you're losing that many neurons. So you want to get treated right away. So I think that is an accomplishment that from our group that has been really great for the community here. So happy to take any questions. I really feel I'm excited to be back here and be able to share this story, and just want to thank all of my professors that helped get me to where I am today. So thank you.
So we have a lot of questions coming from the house here, and with 3 physicians here, I'm not sure whether I should say open wider or lean back and talk about my mom, but one of the 3 of you can help here. So. There have been an enormous amount of changes in the medical profession and in medicine in general, just in the period of time since you've gone to medical college and you graduated. What would you see as the biggest changes that have happened in your field? Do you want to kick off with that?
Sure. I think there are a lot of changes. Probably one of the biggest is the way that we communicate with each other. So the electronic medical record that has rolled out within the last decade changes things a great deal. I can see what is happening if somebody's seeing the neurologist on my campus, or if somebody is seeing another physician in my system, or if they have been hospitalized. And I have that information immediately at my fingertips. And that really changes a lot about the way we communicate and our ability to be immediately effective. Certainly there are major changes pharmacologically and in psychiatry. I think there are more changes that are going to be happening over the next decade as we really nail down some things genetically that we're kind of right on the cusp of.
And in neurology, what's been the big change?
I think similar as far as the electronic medical record has been really, I think, wonderful. We have something called a CRISP system now, where somebody in one hospital here locally, there's a lot of hospitals now that communicate with CRISP, so you can really get a lot of additional information electronically on patients. Of course, people always talk about things like financial side and reimbursement and how that changes, but I think ultimately if your goal is going into medicine for caring for patients, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So.
And dentistry?
Technology has just changed dentistry dramatically. When we used to do fillings, we would use silver and you would pack it into the the filling, and not a lot of technology to it. Now we have the ability to scan teeth with a scanner and mill teeth right away and put them right into the patient, right away without having to use the impression materials and things. So it's very highly computerized. We've placed implants recently, the last 2 weeks at the school, that were totally controlled through computer placement. So the targeting of the implant going into the jaw was totally controlled like a joystick, putting it in, watching it up on a monitor. Incredible stuff that has gone on due to the changes in technology.
Each one of you talked a lot about your experiences here on the Hill, not as much about medical school itself. As you look back at your experiences in medical school, how would you characterize those, particularly in relationship to the education you got as an undergraduate? Whoever wants to jump in here, jump on in.
I'll start. Well, what you find is when you graduate from college, you think, okay, I'm done. And then you say, well, you're not done. You go to dental school, okay, or you go to medical school, and then you finish school there, which is just as rigorous as it was here, and you find out you only know so much, and that to be successful in your career, you need to continue on with your education, and it's through CE, through getting another degree, but you find that there's always something to learn more in your career. So getting a good start at Western Maryland and really learning how to study and learning how to get yourself prepared for your tests goes on really through your whole life, because you never stop learning.
Medical school was an interesting experience for me, especially the first 2 years. I had been out of kind of intensive classroom work for a while before I went back. There is a lot, that's an understatement. There's an astronomical amount of memorization of stuff. I found it really challenging and was particularly delighted when I got to do clinical work. You clearly managed this way better than I did, because I was studying every single minute and still wondering how I was going to stay afloat.
Yeah, it was a blur. Medical school was a blur. I would say with medical school, I think of learning to study, definitely how you approach your studying, learning how to prioritize what you're studying, because it is such a large volume. And I think finding extracurricular activities at that point that you can continue throughout your life to help you psychologically as you're going through medical school is really key. There was really a great diverse group of people in my medical school class. We had a farmer who had been farming for years before he decided to go back to medical school. We had a motorcycle mechanic that decided to go to medical school. So it was a great diverse background, and people keep their interests outside of medical school, and it's really key to help with, I think, your sanity.
So this description then of this sort of diverse group of people in medical school, I think some people come to college and they have this perception of these are the only the classes that I should take. These are the majors that I can take to get into medical school. All three of you have dramatically different stories here. So can you talk a little bit about moving outside of the box of, just the sort of traditional notion of I have to be a science major, I have to take these courses, and that's the only route that gets me there?
Well, that worked for me that way. I was very focused on the way I did it. But when we look at our classes through the years at the dental school, we have such a diverse background, like you said. We have people who come in their mid-30s and they've been doing other things. I find engineers are very good dental students. They end up, taking their sciences later on. So, getting a degree and being focused is really nice if you have that luxury, and I did, fortunately, but you don't always have it. So you can get one degree and find out that you want to do something else. So you never stop learning, and the opportunities are always there. And so that would be my point: is you just don't always follow the box, and that's why a liberal arts education is good, because it gives you you get to see other avenues and other things while you're in your science major.
psychiatry. I sat in on the admissions committee at University of Maryland, and really what people talked about was, what was their interesting background? What did they do? Oh, this person was in Africa for this many of years doing this, and that was, of course, you got to have the grades and you've got to have the MCAT scores, but really they're looking for a very diverse, interesting background for medical school.
So how long is it going to take you? How long did it take you to become a neurologist?
So 4 years undergrad, 4 years medical school, 1 year of medical internship, 3 years of neurology, and then 1 year of fellowship. So who added that?
Yeah. What about a psychiatrist? How long?
The required is certainly, post-college 4 years of medical school and 4 years of residency with then additional fellowship things that people could do.
And to be a dentist or a dental surgeon?
Well, I did 6 years in elementary school. I'm trying to add it up a little bit. 3 years of middle school. Actually, dental school is 4 years. You can go right out and practice after 4 years. I wouldn't recommend it, and most students do a residency between 1 and 5 years. Oral surgeons actually will do a 5-year residency after 6-year residency after dental school, and they go back to medical school for 2 years and get a medical degree. So they have a long road. But dentistry, you can actually get out and practice after 4 years of dental school.
So a number of people want to know, what's your best advice for somebody applying to medical school?
Well, starting with dental school is, find out what you want to do and be convinced you want to do it. And if you're just doing it just to continue on with education, you don't know why you're doing it, it's probably not a good idea. And if you have to take a year off or 2 years off to work and figure out your avenue of where to go, there's nothing wrong with that. I actually have a son in dental school right now who took 2 years off and worked in the hospital, working in shock trauma and the cancer center, and wanted to go to medical school. And after doing that, he decided to go to dental school. So, these are things that, you don't have to go right away. So make sure it's something you want to do. And if you have to take a little time off to figure it out, do it.
Yeah, I would reiterate some of what Doug said. I think that there certainly are people who go straight through and do beautifully with it, but a year in between is not a bad thing, and a lot of people do a gap year, so certainly nobody looks askance at that. And in terms of the application process, aside from being sure that this is what you really want to do, think about what makes you unique. Everybody did the basic sciences, everybody has decent MCAT scores, but what makes you different than other applicants? And underscore that in your application process. What unique experience have you had? What kind of volunteer work have you done? What makes you unique? And I think you kind of mentioned that in terms of sitting on the admissions committee.
And I guess I'm a little later on as far as medical school education, so I think the cost of medical school education for me was probably higher than for you. But I would say immerse yourself in the medical field before you make the commitment of medical school. Because as I'm sure you've heard, the financial implication of the loans maybe you don't have to take loans, most of us had to take loans, is quite remarkable. And so you want to make sure you know what you're doing when you go in there and start taking those loans, and that you're going to follow through.
You actually moved into one of the questions a number of people wondered, how do you pay for it? What are the alternatives that are out there to cover the cost?
Yeah, loans and more loans, and you pay them a long time. It's 30 years of loans, but it's just one of those payments you just kind of shove under the rug along with everything else you're paying. But if you look at it you're able to do then what you want to do, it's worth it. I would do it again. People ask me, would you do it again? Would you take on the loans again? Would you do it? And I definitely would. So.
In dentistry, the nice thing about dentistry, and one of the reasons why I guess USA and World Report had it as the number 1 or number 2 profession in the last couple years, is that you can go to 4 years of school and get out and practice and start paying your debt off. But you will take loans out, but there's other ways. You can join the public health service and they'll pay for part of your loan repayment. You can actually join the service before you go to dental school, in Army, Navy, Air Force. I don't know if Marines have a program, but you sign up and they pay for your education. And then when you get out, you owe them year for year. So you come out with no debt. You go to you work, serve your country for 4 years and we're doing a really nice service. And then they can also pay for your specialty training, which could be up to another 5 years. And so you'd have to be more of a commitment. So there's other avenues of doing it, but you do have loans. You can have nice parents. You can do other ways, public health, you can do the service. There's ways of doing it. But that's dentistry, and you all end up with a fair amount of debt by the time it's done. That's for sure.
And I think in psychiatry, we've mentioned National Health Service, but there are other underserved places where one can go and work for several years with a great deal of loan forgiveness. And sometimes in places where they're kind of desperate to get psychiatrists, very lucrative jobs plus loan forgiveness. So there are people who've opted to go work on the Eastern Shore and make about twice what I make now in their first couple of years out of residency, get a chunk of loan forgiveness. They're not necessarily going to spend their lives there, although it's a nice place. But they are dramatically reducing debt in the first couple of years out.
The debt is significant, but it's also something that is manageable. It is a little, I guess, when I got out, I had about $22,000 of debt, and now the average is about $200,000. But it's repayable. And it is something that if you want it as a career, and dentistry and medicine are both great careers, it's worth it. And for me, a loan payment was a car payment. For you all getting out, going into these professions, your loan payment is probably a small house. But it works. It works. And you never have trouble getting a loan because everybody pays their loan off. So that's the thing. So.
Can you talk about some of the pros and cons as you analyze, do I want to go into private practice? Do I work in a hospital? Do I go urban? You had mentioned, Sandra, coming back to Westminster. What are some of the thought processes and pros or cons with those choices?
I think one thing, when you're first starting out, the salary you make is in academics versus the salary you make in private practice is going to be quite a big disparity, but you'll make quite a bit more being out in private practice. But I do hear from some of my friends that stayed in academic medicine, as you stay in academic medicine, things kind of can even out somewhat. So I think that's one concern for some people. I think also your lifestyle too should be something you think about. So in private practice, you're in a small group, 1 or 2 neurologists, that means you're on call 50% of the time. Versus in an academic center where you have the buffer of residents and you may be on call 2 weeks out of a year or 4 weeks out of a year. So that's one thing to consider as far as a lifestyle. And then of course what your interest is. Do you like writing papers? Do you like thinking of new ideas? Do you like researching? Do you like teaching? Or that would be something to think about. And then also I think in community neurology or private practice, there's a much higher volume of patients you're seeing. So can you see that many patients in a day? And versus in academic medicine, you may have more complicated patients, but fewer patients to see in a day.
I think it's very much a matter of, exactly as you said, what you like. For me, community psychiatry was something I fell in love with as a resident. I really liked the urban, underserved population. That worked really well for me. And I love the academic setting. I like being able to teach. I like being involved with research. If you told me as a psychiatrist that I had to go into private practice somewhere, I would probably retire. And I don't want to retire for quite a while yet. So it really is very variable. And then it depends on what your job is. Actually, in an academic setting, I am cell phone or pager available to my teams, not necessarily for direct patient call, but to my teams 24/7, 365, unless I'm in an airplane somewhere. So, you know, you got to look at the jobs and figure out what you think is going to work for you.
You know, with the dental degree, you know, my thought was I was going to get out of dental school and practice. And, you know, like I said, I was very focused till I got my dental degree, and then I realized I had a lot of options with that degree. And I ended up doing research. I ended up running a residency program, and I really loved academics. I didn't do the private practice, but private practice is a very good option. Academics, you can get an additional degree like an MBA with your dental degree, and you can run a dental company, or you can run, you know, I know plenty of dentists who are presidents of dental materials companies. So it doesn't have to be your terminal degree. You don't have to provide dental care. It can give you a lot of other options. So it's a good way to go. And it's the same thing with medicine. You don't have to practice medicine. There's a lot of options.
How does a physician actually get a job? What's the process that happens to get hired?
I don't know. Basically, I did the same thing my first day as an attending psychiatrist at University of Maryland that I did my last day as a resident. They just paid me about 3 times more. And literally, you know, this kind of got worked through before I finished my residency. They were in pretty significant need of people to stay on in faculty. My job has evolved in a lot of ways over time, but I've never, as a physician, gone out and specifically looked for a job. So I'm the wrong person to answer this question.
Well, I would say in neurology, since we're recruiting to have people join our practice, it's not how do you go find a job, it's how do you decide by everybody coming after you to get a job, because the need for neurology is so great right now and a lot of other subspecialties in medicine that, you know, you could put your name to one physician recruiter and have, you know, 60 jobs listed for you to choose from. So, and that's in more of the private practice community. As far as the academic world, it's a little bit different. You know, I know journals is one way you can find as far as openings for an academic physician position. If you're doing research projects with other people, that's another way of collaborating to find jobs.
Yeah, I would say there's no unemployed physicians and there's no unemployed dentists. There's always an opportunity to get jobs, and there's different places to work and a lot of variety. So, yeah, I don't think these are careers that are going to be dead ends and you'll find out you don't have a job. So I know 2 of my sons are lawyers. They just got graduated from law school, and they ended up getting additional degrees, an MBA and a CPA, because the law degree isn't necessarily getting the job done right now. So I'm not saying it's a bad career. It's an excellent career for them, but it's not. It's a little more competitive right now.
What do you see as some of either the hottest fields in medicine as we look in the near future, or the greatest opportunities in terms of where greatest openings would be?
Certainly a lot of need in primary care. Shortages of primary care physicians, so family medicine, internal medicine, you know, kind of basic fields throughout the country. But then I think there are other kind of hot developing things that some people may find more exciting.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
You know, I think geriatric medicine is a very big need right now. Any of the, you know, we have a lot of aging population, so any of the fields that help care for those individuals. But I think because there is going to be more of a national physician shortage, that's what we're going to be seeing, I really think all fields are going to be needed.
Yeah, I think dentistry was going to have did have a shortage. I believe we're kind of catching up, but there's still plenty of, you know, opportunities in different areas. Probably general dentistry is probably the best opportunity at this point, but all the areas, periodontics, endodontics, oral surgery, they all seem to do pretty well. So.
Each one of you in your opening remarks talked about experiences that you had here on the Hill that really profoundly impacted who you are now. If you had to do it all over again, is there something you would have done differently about your undergraduate experience? No?
I was very happy with my experience. I have to say, when I left here, I have no regrets, and in fact, some of my lifelong friends are people I went to school with, and we always say to each other, we understood how great we had it when we were here. Mm-hmm. As for that point in our life, you know, the freedom we had, just everything was a very, very good time, and I have no regrets, no changes.
So what was the best class you had at this college?
Okay, I took a Jan term course, and well, there's two, but it was squash. And I took it in January. You guys still have Jan terms, I guess, correct? And so we had squash, and we ended up the class at the end of the Jan term. We played, we all thought we were pretty good, and we played the girls' squash team at Hopkins, and they crushed us, just basically. So that was a really fun time. That was fun.
How about for you, Ann? What was like the course you remember more than anything else?
Probably the poetry seminar with Del Palmer, mm-hmm. that had nothing to do with, you know, what I was majoring in, but that was just a great way to spend Wednesday evenings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam?
Oh, that's really tough because I had so many different experiences. I did like my medical sociology course. I don't know if there's anything like that now, but it talked about current medical topics, and I thought that was really interesting at that time. And I remember going back as I went through things in medical school and thinking and referring back to that class as far as topics we had.
Is there a non-curricular based experience you would say to students who are interested in going into medicine, this is something you ought to really think about doing during your undergraduate time? Yeah, outside of the class experience.
I think that medical exposure is really important, that sometimes, you know, people get the idea that they want to be a physician or be a dentist and they haven't had much real life exposure, and it's really worth getting some of that early on, because A, you should know what you're getting into, and B, it demonstrates once you get around to applying that this really is very genuine interest on your part.
For you, what was that, how did that experience happen?
Well, it didn't, and it should have.
Okay.
I didn't actually have sort of that extracurricular experience until after I had completed my education here, and then I did things connected to my psychology master's, where I had a fair amount of exposure to people living with various kinds of psychiatric diagnoses that kind of nailed things down in my head.
Mm-hmm. But you said you knew you wanted to be a dentist off the bat.
Well, I have to tell you, though, and what you said is I had no clue. Mm-hmm. Because I'd never worked at a dental office. I'd never worked in a profession. None of my brothers were dentists or uncles or aunts. My football coach was, and I really liked him, and he had Wednesdays off, which sounded good. And so I get into dental school, and I remember sitting in my living room with my dad, and he looks at me, and I just had my teeth extracted, and I was in pain. And he looks at me, he goes, "Congratulations for getting into dental school." He goes, "You sure you want to put your hands in people's mouths your whole life?" And I'm sitting here in pain, and I'm going, well, So I would tell you what I really should have done, and I made the right choice, and I love my career. I wouldn't change anything, but you should work in the field, either work in medicine or dentistry. There's always opportunities. I can tell you, dentists love to have people in and shadowing them, and it gives them, you know, something they can show off their, you know, their technologies and things. So it's really important to work in the field.
When was the moment for you where you knew this is what I want to do?
I would say that Jan term that was offered was being immersed in the University of Maryland and seeing the med students rounding with the residents and attendings and how that worked, and just the whole hustle and bustle and excitement of being there, I think made me realize that I really could picture myself doing that.
So as we wrap up here, the healthcare system in America is I would say under indictment. I mean, essentially, in terms of people's concerns about cost, access to care, the politicization of the healthcare system. As you look out to the healthcare system that these students might be inheriting after they got through school. I mean, what do you see as what's going to be significantly different, and either your hopes or your fears about where we're headed?
In dentistry, I just went to our national meeting for dental educators, and they were showing the pie graphs of where we are. And dentistry is still a small business deal. Most dentists are either sole or in small group practices, but that's changing. And it's probably going more corporate because of the cost of technologies and being able to buy the computers for the digital records and the digital x-rays and the milling of crowns. So I believe the swing is going to go more towards corporate dentistry, and you'll be an employee instead of a small business owner probably in the next 20 years. But I would say right now it's still a small business, and it's kind of nice that you can be a business owner and you can really control your destiny.
Other thoughts on the future?
Controversial and simply my opinion, I would love to see us go to a more universal healthcare kind of system and approach. I work with people who sometimes have tremendous barriers to care that I would have no difficulty accessing. Mental health can be a carve out and treated very differently, and I would love to see everybody who needed mental health care be able to access it easily, and that is not always the case currently.
Last thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, I would say, I remember when I first got my medical insurance coming out of medical school, and if I had to go to the doctor, I went to the doctor and I went for a test, and I maybe I had a $2 copay or something in there. And I think the burden of the cost of healthcare is going to be more on all of us in the future, and learning to help. I think as physicians, us learning to better give care so that we're keeping that in mind as far as not ordering maybe 75 tests for somebody that maybe only needs 3 tests, and trying to keep in mind, the goal of healthcare for our entire nation, not, and keeping those funds in mind.
Well, I want to say on behalf of everyone here at the college, we're extraordinarily proud of your careers, of how you've represented this college since you've graduated. I know that there may be many students here particularly, or others who want a chance to ask more specific questions, and what I'd like to do is, after this event, we're going to go right through that door right there, and we have an opportunity to have some refreshments and a chance to further the conversation with our 3 guests tonight. I know you're all proud graduates of Western Maryland College, but it's really important to have a diploma that you can hang up on the wall that says McDaniel College too. So, because when people are in your office, I want to make sure they knew where you went to school. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees, we congratulate you with your McDaniel degree as well, and please thank these folks for being here tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you all.